Next, let me present to you the information of the cases. The full citation of our case will be Fufiana against Dr. Su Fu Moon and Anor, 2007 MLJ 533. However, the parties involved are Fufiana and Su Fu Moon and Anor. Case citation will be 2007 MLJ 593. The court level and the location will be the Federal Court of Putrajaya. Judges involved are Mohammad Zaidin Chief Justice, Ahmad Fairuz, CJ Malaya and Siti Norma Yaqub FSJ. Judgment date will be 29 December 2006.
Moving to the facts of the case, Fiona is the appellant in this case, is a passenger in a car accident on 11 July 1982. The accident occurred near Asunta Hospital, which is the second respondent, which resulted in her being warded at the hospital. The appellant suffered injuries including bruises on the lower abdominal wall, right breast, anterior iliac spine areas, and closed dislocation of C4 and C5 vertebrae with bilateral lock facets. Her most severe injuries was a closed dislocation of the C4 and C5 vertebrae with bilateral lock facets, causing severe neck pain and discomfort. Dr. Celine Pereira prescribed initial medical treatment, which included taking x-rays of her neck and placing a cervical collar around it to minimize the risk of paralysis. The first respondent, which is Dr. Su Fook Moon, examined and initially treated the appellant's cervical vertebrae using traction with weights in an attempt to minimize the displaced cervical vertebrae, but it was unsuccessful. A manipulation or closure reduction procedure was performed to unlock the lock facet joints. Despite 3 attempts, the dislocated vertebrae remained unaffected. The operation to restore the dislocating vertebrae was also conducted, but the operation failed as the appellant became paralyzed the day after the surgery. As the appellant's condition remained unchanged, Dr. Mohandas later performed a myelogram and discovered that the wire loop used in the previous procedure had pressured the spinal cord, causing total paralysis. The appellant then underwent a second operation to remove the wire loop, but this treatment also did not alleviate her paralysis, leaving her confined to a wheelchair. The hospital, which is the second respondent, was found vicariously liable for the first respondent negligence, act as a surgeon in the hospital. The hospital did not stand up to explain the first respondent's medical negligence during the treatment procedure. The first respondent needed to fully educate the appellant about the effects of the medical treatment, resulting in the appellant signing the permission form without knowing whether or not she required the procedure. The appellant believed the hospital treatment procedure caused the paralysis. As a result, the appellant sued both the first and second respondent for medical negligence. The first respondent found negligence in the treatment procedure and was proven to be a servant of the hospital, that is the second respondent. Therefore, the hospital was held vicariously liable for the negligence. The court allowed the appeal and restored the High Court decisions, declaring the first respondent liable for medical negligence due to failing to convey the treatment's dangers to the appellant, and declared the Bolam test to be irrelevant. The court concluded that the second respondent is vicariously liable for the first respondent negligence and that the Rogers and Whittaker test was more relevant than Bolam test.
Okay, last but not least, the issue is whether Dr. Su Fu Moon could have acted appropriately and properly once paralysis was detected or discovered by him. Together, these issues define the measure of the degree of Dr. Su Fu Moon's negligence in the surgery and the adequacy of the consent that was given by the patient.
Now I will be explaining about the contentions, and I will be talking about the contention by appellant. Dr. Su Fu Moon, the initial respondent, did not adequately inform Fufiana, which is the plaintiff, of the risk and side effects of the suggested treatment, and Fufiana claims that she would not have consented to the medical treatments if she would have known the risk behind the treatments. However, the defendant signed the initial permission form without confirming the necessity of the procedure for the plaintiff. Therefore, the plaintiff became paralyzed and lost feels in her limbs due to the treatment, leading to the trial judge to question the voluntariness of the second permission form. However, the obligation to inform patients of risk should not be governed by the Bolam test, which allows adherence to recognized medical standards. Medical professionals must disclose all inherent and materials risks to patients in a manner they can understand to enable informed decisions. Thank you.
The argument began with the vehicle collision. The appellant with the neck injuries necessitating surgeries to avoid paralysis. The consent forms were prepared for the surgeries, and then the appellant expressly approved the operations by the signature and then with the thumbprint. And moving on to the central issue is whether the appellant was informed of the asset associated with the surgeries, and which is more significant than the consent given. And then the defendant claimed they obtained the appellant's approval for the surgeries despite allegations. There was a conflicting medical testimony about whether the appellant should have been warned about the possibility of paralysis. Unlike in the Bolam case, there was no clear competing body or medical opinion on informing on the appellant. The defendants argued their action met with the Bolam test standard of care, allowing adherence to recognized medical standards. Thank you.
Moving on next to the judgment by the court and its ratio decidendi. The first judgment is the court allowed the appeal and restored the orders of the High Court. It was also held that the cost in the Court of Appeal and the High Court to be borne by the respondent. The court held that the first respondent was liable for medical negligence as the first respondent had breached the duty as a medical practitioner to inform the risk of the proposed treatment to the appellant. Next, the court also held that the Bolam test is not applicable and irrelevant to this case as the patients were not provided with inherent and material risk of the proposed treatment, fitting up the duty and standard care of a medical practitioner. Next is the ratio decidendi for the first judgment. The first respondent is liable for medical negligence as the first respondent had failed to fulfill the duty as a medical practitioner to advise the appellant of the risk of the suggested treatment. The appellant as a patient should have been given advice regarding the risk of the treatment to ensure the patient is given the option of whether to proceed or to decline the proposed treatment. Next, the first respondent also failed to take immediate action upon knowing that the operation had paralyzed the appellant and had only prescribed medication for the duration of over 4 days before consulting a neurosurgeon.
The second judgment for this case is the court further held that the second respondent is vicariously liable. The judgment was made on the ground that there is an obligation for members of the medical profession to speak up about any wrongdoings or malpractice, as in this case, the negligence of the first respondent. And the court also held that the Rogers and Whittaker test would be a more relevant and viable test to be applied in this case. The ratio decidendi for the second judgment is the second respondent is vicariously liable for medical negligence as the first respondent works as the sovereign. This means that the first respondent is under the second respondent's responsibility.
Last but not least, the commentary and the conclusion. The court case of Fook, Fiona, Dr. Fook and others explores medical negligence and the standard of care that doctors deliver to their patient. The case involved an appellant, namely Fiona, had a car accident that led to injuries in her neck, following which she underwent 2 surgeries conducted by Dr. Fook. Citing alleged medical malpractice, she stated that the first surgery rendered her paralyzed and that she received insufficient information on potential complications. The trial judge sided with Fiona largely due to the negligence of Dr. Fook in not discussing the risks involved as well as the case. Highlighted the Bolam principle, where a doctor can only be blamed if he or she acts contrary to the standard in the medical practice. The Bolam principle was applied by the trial judge, which seemed to look into but did not strictly adhere to the aforementioned principle, as the Court of Appeal did in this case, and when compared to the Bolam case, with respect to consent and medical context. In conclusion, it was the Court of Appeal that stressed on the requirement of clear and convincing evidence in cases on appeals against the findings of the facts. This case is crucial in analyzing important tenets of the medical law field, focusing on the right-shield dichotomy of patients and physicians. Okay, jap. Yang ni untuk komen ni. So, my comment for this case is, in my point of view for this case, firstly, it makes the concept of patient's affirmation, which means that the patient should agree with the doctor about any operations or treatments that will be conducted. The process has to be explained thoroughly, and it has to be ascertained that the patient understood the given information. Secondly, worthy of consideration here is the judiciary position on the Bolam principle while parsing this case. It is in the principle that the medical practitioners get some corrections. Finally, the issue of providers' negligence and the latter's action and behavior propriety in the given circumstances may be considered determining the provider's liability. Finally, drawing from the findings in this case, it is possible to raise questions as to the need for medical intervention and its necessity as such, considering that the appellants stayed paralyzed for 4 months before they could go for a second surgery. The trial judge drew attention towards the delay in the performance of the surgery, by which he claimed that the appellant might have been saved from suffering much in the event of an early operation being conducted. Therefore, this case of Fook and Dr. Fook and others has a certain amount of importance in order to comprehend the position of Malaysia's law concerning medical negligence. It aims at asserting and enhancing the rights of the patients, while at the same time avoiding the setting up of formidable barriers against the discretion of healthcare practitioners. They argue that the ruling offers proper reasons for a clear demarcation of medical negligence to the actual mistakes made by the physicians. That's all from us. Thank you.